This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to another edition of the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience. I am Steve Riddle, back again for another go-around. Today we are concluding our theme week. We're concluding our theme week this week, which is all about football movies. Of course, we are currently in the midst of the NFL playoffs this year in 2026. Of course, by the time you listen to this, the conference championships will have already been set. If I had to make a quick prediction here, since this is going to be happening since I'm recording this ahead of time, I'm predicting that it's going to be the Seahawks and the Rams in the NFC Championship, and the Broncos and Texans in the AFC Championship. But we're actually not going to be talking about pro football today. We're actually going to go into the college level for today's episode, because we're going to be discussing a kind of an interesting movie about a player that you may not know about off the surface, because he never did take it to the next level from out of college. But in terms of the college itself, he's kind of become a folk hero, I guess you can say. So the film I'm going to be talking about today is Rudy. This, of course, was released on October 15th, 1993, with a budget of $13 million, box office $22.8, starring Sean Astin, Jon Favreau, Ned Beatty, Charles S. Dutton, Robert Prosky, Jason Miller, and Lili Taylor, and in a little-known role, Vince Vaughn. So, and of course, tells the story of Daniel Rudy Rudiger, who had dreamed of playing football at the University of Notre Dame, despite numerous obstacles. It is, of course, based off the Rudy is actually a real person. He is actually still alive with us to this day. He currently is 77, and he's, like I said, he did end up playing at Notre Dame, and then would go on to become a motivational speaker and an author. So again, never translated his college level to the pros, but like I said, he has become a bit of a folk hero there at Notre Dame. So, as I usually do here, we'll start off this with the three things that worked and the three things that didn't work. Now, for the three things that worked, number one, I really, again, kind of similar to we get these kind of films. I definitely enjoyed the story they told of Rudy, kind of, starting, he played football in high school, then spent some time in his dad's steel mill, but he always had the dream of going to Notre Dame, even though he was, a short guy, not very athletic and not very academically sound, because we do find out in the film that he is dyslexic. But we see his, but one of the things they talk about a lot throughout the film is the fact that he has, he has a big heart, and he has, this unshakable dream that, he's never that no one's gonna stop him from doing, whether it be, those around him, particularly, his family. I mean, his older brother, particularly his brother Frank, who is very, he's very, not non-committal, but he's very adamant that Rudy's not going to succeed. And even Rudy's father, who is a huge Notre Dame fan but has never seen a game in person, he prefers to watch it on TV. But again, Rudy perseveres through all that, and eventually does end up not just making the team, but at one point does get to play in the final game of his senior year, the only game he does end up playing, and he comes, like I said, kind of becomes the big hero of the game. So I think they really did a good job of that. Number two, really establishing the people that Rudy that help Rudy on his journey. In particular, D-Bob, the teaching assistant at Holy Cross, where Rudy goes prior to going to Notre Dame. He he's a real, integral part of making sure Rudy gets his grades up, helping Rudy discover that he has dyslexia, and then in the process, Rudy helps D-Bob become better with women, to the point that D-Bob actually, by the end of the film, does end up getting a girlfriend. So kind of seeing their relationship grow over the film, I think, is really well done. And I think it's just, again, one of those things. It's one of those things where you have the people that do believe in Rudy and end up, supporting him throughout the film. And then we see the moment at the end when Rudy does finally get to play in a game that D-Bob's there with his girlfriend, cheering him on, as he should be. So, and then number 3, another guy that really is a big, motivation, rock there for Rudy, of course, is Fortune, who is the head groundskeeper at Notre Dame Stadium. And he's kind of one of those, he's one of those guys that's become jaded over the years, as we eventually learn, he did play for Notre Dame, but he never got to play in a game. He rode the bench, and he assumed it was because of his race, and he harbored ill will toward it. Though, as we find out later, he has expressed regret throughout all that. Hence, why he has never seen a game since then. But through the relationship with Rudy, he's able to kind of overcome those, kind of come to terms with his own personal, doubt, and he's there at the game there to see Rudy play, and we kind of, he's got this hard expression throughout the entire film, but then we finally kind of see him soften up when he sees Rudy play, and kind of, again, kind of comes full circle with everything, which I think was just really, really well done. Now for the 3 things that didn't work. Again, they want to make it, obviously, they want to tell a story about how and want the audience to sympathize with Rudy and feel good for him at the end. But I don't know if they had to go as far as to make the coach, Dan Devine, who takes over for the previous coach. So one of the notes in the film is that the previous coach, Ara Parshigan, says that Rudy can suit up for one game in his senior year, but then he ends up retiring, and Dan Devine, who had been a coach for the Packers, comes in to take over, and he basically does not allow Rudy to suit up. And of course, one of the big scenes is that the players come in and basically lay their jerseys down on his desk, to convince him to let Rudy, dress up for the one game. In reality, that never actually happened. They never, lay their jerseys on the desk, and Devine actually was credited as one of Rudy's kind of big motivations to stay on the team, as he was very supportive of Rudy and did let him play in the last game. Which, so, obviously, again, they want to tell a story about another just more obstacles for Rudy to overcome. But I don't know. I think they kind of made Devine a little bit more make it seem like more antagonistic than they probably needed to. So they have that. Number 2, one player that we didn't see in the film, but was actually a pretty big name at Notre Dame around the same time that Rudy had played there in real life, was, of course, the great Joe Montana, who obviously we know would go on to have a great career in the NFL with the 49ers and the Chiefs. But he was there at Notre Dame as the quarterback during the time that Rudy was there, and we don't see him depicted in the film at all, which is kind of sad. I think that would have been really good. But of course, Montana also would debunk some myths about the film. He also confirmed that the jersey thing never happened, and he said that there was a point where the crowd's chanting Rudy's name right before he goes in. He says that never happened either. And he says that because at the end of the film, Rudy was carried off by the team at the end of the game, which was true. That did happen, because they mentioned in the epilogue that no other Notre Dame player had been carried off the field at the time of the film's release in '93. But Montana claims that the people that carried Rudy off were 3 of the biggest pranksters on the team. So again, whether that's real, it's legit or not, it still would have been nice to see Montana in the film, even if it was just for a little bit part. And then number 3, we kind of get the little side story of Rudy and his girlfriend in high school, Sherry, who they stick together throughout the time, and then after Rudy's friend is killed in a accident at the mill. When he decides to finally take that next step and actually go to Notre Dame, she ends up leaving him, which they kind of bring it up there, but then they kind of forget about it. And then the next thing the next time we see her, she's with his brother. And again, it's like they try to add all this like unnecessary tension to the to everything just to kind of make Rudy a little bit more sympathetic. And again, it's not not the worst thing, but I think it's one of those things where maybe they didn't have to go that far and do something like that just to kind of you're already doing enough of a good job to make Rudy into a good sympathetic baby face in essence, but probably could have gone without that. So now we'll go to some of my awards here. MVP, I think it's easily Sean Astin. I think he does a really great job in bringing Rudy to life on the big screen. You can tell the effort he put into making the role count. Just going through his struggles, trying to get into Notre Dame, get on the team, and then eventually get on the field for that last game, I think. And Sean Astin does a really tremendous job. Might be one of his most unheralded roles. I know when people think of Sean Astin, they may think of him as, of course, as Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings, but this I think might be probably his career, one of his best roles. So I think he definitely deserves some props there. My favorite character in the film, there are some good ones. I mean, I think it's easy to say Rudy, but I'm actually going to go with D-Bob. I think Jon Favreau really does a good job in bringing that character to life. Again, we kind of see him, take Rudy under his wing, help him learn, help him grow. At the same time, again, Rudy helps him get a girl and helps bring some nice little levity to the film, because I mean it's not a complete serious film, but there's very little humor in it, and I think and Favreau does a really good job in helping and making D-Bob one of the more funnier characters of the film. Least favorite character, I think, is probably going to, again, I think it's there's not many, but I think I'm gonna have to go Frank, who's Rudy's older brother. He is a complete asshole throughout this film. And I know, and obviously he's, the idea of it is that he's obviously looking out for his brother. He doesn't want him to, chase silly dream, but we kind of see it even throughout the film when we see Rudy get into Notre Dame and he says he finally makes the team. His father's kind of starting to soften up to it and kind of realizes that, maybe there is something there. But even to the very end, not until that moment when he's in the stands and he sees Rudy on the field, does Frank kind of realize that, Rudy has lived out his dream. And it would have been nice to see Frank Frank and Rudy kind of come together, because even at the point when Rudy's on the phone with them trying to get them to come to the finals game, you almost kind of hear it in Rudy's voice that Frank's almost balking at the idea. So again, just not he's definitely a character you definitely don't want to. They made a good job of making him not want to like. Favorite scene, there's a couple. Again, some really good scenes, but I think I'm going to go in the mill, in the scene early on in the film where Pete, who's Rudy's best friend, gifts him the Notre Dame jacket that he wears throughout the film, and kind of because Pete's one of the few people that also early on that supports Rudy throughout his whole journey, that supports Rudy for his dreams. So just kind of seeing this moment between two really good friends, I thought was really, really well done. Obviously the ending scene where Rudy makes the sack to end the game and then gets carried off on the field is a great scene too. But I think Rudy getting the jersey, the jacket from Pete the first time, I think is probably the best scene of the film. An overall final grade, I haven't seen the film. I may have only seen the film like once before I did this, and seeing it again, it's a really nice little film. Again, like I said, Sean Astin pretty much carries it with his work. You got some good side characters in there, and just seeing Rudy go through this journey to make it to Notre Dame and make it onto the field for the final game, I think is really well done. There's a couple things maybe could have been tweaked a little bit, but overall, I think I'm going to go with an 8 out of 10. I think it's a good little film. and I think it's a good representation of a guy who had a dream and worked his ass off to get to it, and like I said, he's become kind of a hero in Notre Dame folklore. So I think that's ultimately the final grade I'm going to give it. I think it's a good 8 out of 10. But that's going to do it here for me. Thank you again for following along and for listening along. This was a good little theme week to get things good. Little first theme week here to get this pod going. I know we got some really good ones coming up down the road. And looking forward to continue doing this. So continue to support us, and we'll continue to provide the content. But with that, I am Steve Riddle. This has been the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience, and we'll see you next time.